Hail, hail, the Celts are here, and what the hell do we care now? We're already at the first pre-season friendlies of the 25-26 campaign, and we're following that same sort of formula, that same sort of methodology that Celtic used last year. We're having some kind of skirmish, kind of domestic friendlies before travelling around and doing some more kind of glamorous, potentially friendlies, in some nice settings or whatever. But again, slightly stiffer opposition as we prepare this year for obviously the crucial Champions League qualifier that we're all staring down the horizon at the moment. And this year we opened our pre-season friendly campaign account, whatever you want to think of it as, at Queen's Park in Lesser Hampden, or the City Park Stadium, whatever we're calling it. And Celts are here, we were in attendance for the game, and this is a stadium that we often frequent for, the Youth Champions League games, and we've seen a lot of familiar names and faces from those fixtures blending in with some of the first team, particularly in the second half, but under the watchful eye of Brendan Rodgers the entire match, of course, in this one. And this was a game that, normally we wouldn't make too much of a big deal about here on the channel, but I was there at it. We're all really interested and keen to see the next crop of youth players that might potentially break into the squad, and some of these names we have actually seen last year, threaten to get into the squad, make some appearances, make their debuts, that sort of thing. So in the video today we'll talk about the youth prospects that we've seen in this game, but also we did get a little bit of maybe a peek behind the curtain for the tactical adjustments that we're all thinking that Brendan will be making in this next version of the Celtic team, post Greg Taylor, with even more reinforcements coming in this summer, different checks and balances that we're expecting to see across the squad, with it slightly changing the shape and the composition, over this transfer window. This is probably set to be one of the most transformative windows we've had in a lot of ways, with the absence potentially of some of the key playmaker types that we've had in the squad over the last couple of windows, being replaced by different types of players, and now we're seeing that again this summer with Tierney for Taylor being quite an obvious example. So left back is still one of those areas where we're keeping a close eye on. At any point in the video, if you do laugh, you learn, you like something or whatever, please do like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this, as we are very, very close, guys, to breaking through the 13,000 subscriber mark, and we cannot do that without your support as we launch our assault towards our goal of 18,888. We'll be sure to follow the hoops all the way through pre-season and cover as much of the developments in the matches that we see, and as well on top of that is the usual stuff that you guys have been enjoying here on the channel in the off-season periods, looking back at some kind of report card stuff, some sort of retrospective on the year gone by, as well as keeping up to speed with the rumour mill and the transfer developments as they unfold before us. But yeah, let's just get stuck straight into this one, because like I mentioned at the tip-off, this isn't really a game that we would normally really get our teeth into and do a full breakdown analysis kind of match of, but with the youth prospects that were involved in this and some of the tweaks that we're just going to get into the deep end with here, I do think there was a good bit of meat on the bones of this one, because we had, for all intents and purposes coming into this game, what you could consider to be one of basically our second strongest midfield, alongside of that being, for the most part, really a who's who of that kind of tertiary element of the Celtic squad, with a lot of the youth prospects that have made appearances and some of the ones that we've kind of heard about or we've seen in the Youth Champions League that haven't quite kind of broke all the way through into the first team. Now I must say, first things first, coming into this game, seeing McGregor and Engels and Trusty in this game was a little bit kind of jarring for little periods of the game, because every time I go to the City Park Stadium, it's to see just the B team, and you're seeing the likes of Kyle Ure and different other players in these positions, which we actually came to see later on in the second half. But being so close, I had my son with me, little mini Quinny, and being so close to the action and having these guys, like, really, you could you reach out and touch them almost. It was a lovely kind of pre-season experience, and I do recommend any Celtic fans out there, if you do have the ability or halfway the notion to go to one of these games in the smaller venues around Glasgow and Scotland or whatever, in pre-season especially, to take it up. It was a good kind of night out, as it were. But one thing that was evident for this, for everyone involved in Celtic, and especially in the first half of this game, is we were just so clean on the ball. We were very, very good at moving the ball from left to right, and because you're so close to the pitch, you can really hear, maybe not quite everything all the players are saying to one another, but you can hear a lot more of what the commands, what the instructions are on the pitch. First touches were absolutely impeccable. It was a bit of a masterclass in that regard for any kind of young football fans or any young football players showing up to watch the game. First touches were impeccable. Pass selection was always really good, and physically you could see the extra drive. Like, Celtic weren't like in cruise control and on the back foot the whole game, just chilling out. There was a real kind of endeavour. There was a real push to go and score some goals and to grab the game by the scruff of the neck, as it were. And I thought Engels was really keen to get involved in the opening proceedings of the games, and the left hand side is really where a lot of my focus was. And if any of you guys caught the game as well, feel free to leave your thoughts, feelings, takeaways of the game down in the comment section below. Add it to the conversation in the video, of course. But Engels was doing the usual thing that we see where he normally pops out wide to be a kind of wider player and link up with the left back and the left winger like he does. But like we've often said on the channel, that there's actually a few things in this first half was kind of coming home to roost moments for stuff we've covered here for the youth team as well as the first team. And Engels, for me, has had his best performances in a Celtic shirt in the Hatate spot on the left hand side of the midfield, which is what he was doing here. And quite often when we were trying to build out, McKeown would be in and around where Kenny was, almost as a second striker, which is also kind of similar to what we normally see from Hatate in terms of actual positioning. And again, it's something we've seen as a bit of a strength from McKeown against domestic opponents, certainly, that playing off the front man and giving the back four an extra player to deal with, an extra kind of problem to solve, is kind of where his strengths have lay. And when we see Engels out on this side of the pitch here and we're controlling possession for the most part, moving it from left to right, a few really interesting things happened. We'll start with what we see on the left hand side. Mitchell Frame is predominantly super wide all the way up the left wing here. Now this is a player that has made his career thus far at Celtic at left midfield, and I did find it interesting that both he and Montgomery were playing on the left hand side together, and they were doing very different things. I thought at first when I seen the team sheet that it might have been a little bit more of, they kind of both do the same thing, and who wins their 50-50s more, who's got the better cross selection. We might have seen a bit of that kind of coming into the game, but no. Once we were kind of building up and putting Queen's Park on the back foot, and we were kind of building that Brendan Rodgers web where we're moving the ball from left to right, we're looking for the right pockets of space to go and rip teams open. Montgomery was doing a big part of the Greg Taylor tribute act. He was roaming into between the lines here and between the midfield and defence, and almost with his back to goal, playing like another attacking midfielder, playing like another kind of player on the front line here. And with Frame holding width, whenever the ball was kind of getting played around the back here, like it does with McGregor, Murray and Trusty for the most part, although Montgomery was always starting in left back, very quickly, as soon as the possession was being constructed in this way, he was still popping into this zone here. And I think a lot of us were expecting with the departure of Taylor, this role would be somewhat retired. So I find it quite interesting that we're going into pre-season still with this same pattern of play, still with this demand, this same expectation for the left back. I didn't see too much of Montgomery coming in and doing the Taylor thing of holding hands with McGregor and building up a base in midfield against the opponent, the level of opponent that we had, and the quality of midfield in and around McGregor, Engels and McKeown. For this game, it maybe wasn't needed as much. But I did find that really interesting that Montgomery, who looked really good at left back, by the way, again, you've got to contextualise that with the opposition, but physically, technically, everything, I didn't think he looked out of place at all. I thought he looked quite the part of, not quite. Obviously, Ralston's a Scotland international, but I could see Montgomery kind of moving into the Ralston kind of territory in the squad, potentially. Brendan Rodgers did make some comments after the game about looking within for players in depth and all the rest of it. And I think somebody like Montgomery or Mitchell Frame, who did play pretty well in the first half, to be honest with you, I thought he was quietly effective. I think Montgomery looked a bit more first team ready. You can tell he's played in the SPFL already with St Johnstone and whoever else he's been out on loan at, maybe even Queen's Park as well, in fact. And Frame did look a bit more of like the kid of the two. I thought he did really well to get by his man. He got through to the byline, obviously gets into this inside channel here for the cutback for Kenny's goal, which was some great drive, some great endeavour. And despite looking like the kind of the more youth prospect of the two, he did actually have a bit of end product, which is something we're always looking for from these players, and didn't really ever shy away from taking the ball, was always quite good and holding his position and holding his role. And in the odd occasion where the ball did get hit forward and maybe Queen's Park were going to try and press with one or two players or whatever, again, no one really got away from him. He was never kind of left wanting when it came to defensive work or whatever. But the way it kind of worked out with Frame was giving us all the width on the left-hand side. Montgomery was being at left back, and as soon as it crossed the halfway point here, was sneaking himself into that cheat code position. I thought was really interesting. Another one of those moments we had in this game that was like a coming home or another kind of proof in the pudding moment was Jude Bonner. Now, I seen Jude Bonner do this exact role for the Celtic youth team against RB Leipzig, if memory serves me right, which was a very meaningful victory. It was a very well earned result. The team played great. Leipzig's youth academy, as we know, is right up there in European football, and Bonner, although he was playing right forward, right wing, however you want to think of it as, was actually off the ball, and even when we were attacking, playing much more narrow. He wasn't really given as much width at all, quite deliberately, and he was almost, especially whenever Queen's Park were taking the ball out from their goalkeeper, from a goal kick or whatever, he was almost kind of tucking in here, and it felt like at times the midfield was a bit more diamondy, maybe a bit more 4-1-3, you know, kind of shape, however you want to think of it as. But Bonner was doing a really good job of kind of tucking in here, making it extra hard for them to play through the middle. But also as well, it just meant that anytime we did turn the ball over, we had bodies in the centre area to be able to kind of go on and take advantage of it. And this kind of shown itself up as well whenever we were like building the web out, as it were, where we can get Montgomery into these inside pockets. Bonner was then coming inside with Kenny to occupy the back four. And as a kind of attack kind of proposition, it worked out really well when you've got McKeown just floating around, being close to the ball at all times. Engels roaming out wide, McGregor doing his kind of metronome thing, you know, moving the ball from left to right. And it was Donovan that actually gave us our width on the right hand side. This is a player when we did our youth team report card, a player that I think I've got high hopes for in the squad. I was really pleased with his first half performance, and again the thing I tried to stress in that report card video about Donovan was he just doesn't do anything wrong. No one gets anyone by him. And when I was watching him in the first half here, I think he really held his own very, very well. And kind of, if any of you had seen that report card video and then kind of kept an eye on him in this match, you would have really seen what I was driving at, where he didn't look like a youth player compared to maybe some of the other boys that we've seen come on in the second half as much. He looked similar to Montgomery. And I guess I would maybe just about squeeze Frame into that part of the conversation of they looked like a first team player that's on like the fringes, you know, a player that could step up if called upon, but isn't like the best player in the team, isn't in the best 11, as it were. And I say Bonner, like, it's from where he was on the pitch, from where I was sitting first half, I could see tactically what he was up to here, and it just gave like McKeown and Kenny a bit more license to kind of move and press forward when required, knowing that Bonner kind of had this escape for Queen's Park somewhat blocked off, the same way that Frame would have, or depending on the stage and the phase of play, maybe Montgomery would on that side of the pitch. And yeah, like Queen's Park never really managed to string many passes together. I thought Murray and Trusty looked really confident and capable. Doohan looked like, you know, to be honest with you, looked like a good keeper, you know, nice big lad and all the rest of it, but maybe because of the venue where we're at, he still kind of did look to me like a Celtic B goalkeeper in a weird way. I can't really explain it. And I think this might tell us a few different things, that someone like Ben Negren could probably, because we know Nicholas Kuhn is on his way to Como now, and we know Negren has a bit of that capability of being a central artillery type player, a Rodgers type, as everyone keeps saying, or whatever. And I see that too, but he can play wide. We actually kind of need him to play wide as the team stands at the moment. You would imagine anyway, kind of warming into this Champions League situation. And the role that Bonner was able to play here, this is something I could see Negren doing quite easily, where he's not actually the width guy for us on the front three. We maybe get that from the other side of the pitch, and he's more about tucking in, supporting the striker a bit more directly, and even then allowing someone else to cheat code and move over to this side of the pitch, which then allows him a bit more room to get into this kind of zone here. So I thought that was interesting, as well as the left back having the potential to maybe still do a bit of the Greg Taylors, whether that be Montgomery or Frame or Tierney themselves. Will be really interesting to see as pre-season somewhat rolls on. And I've even heard some suggestions that maybe even Inamura could be thought of in that kind of mould. I said it when I did the eye test on him on the channel, I just don't see any version of a left back in that kid as it sits right now. Centre back fine, with a better partner than what we've seen him play with in Japan. It's quite easy to imagine he does better, but again, Brendan has already said he's an out-and-out project player, so we'll see how it goes, if he stays in the fold to kind of cut his teeth to learn his craft, or if we loan him out somewhere. Don't really think it's a bad move, as long as we have the right expectations on a player like that we're not signing him expecting him to displace Trusty or Scales or something, because I do think that's a bit too early to think about for a guy like that. It could come in and be amazing, don't get me wrong, but I think you know what I'm driving at. And for the second half, it was wholesale changes. The whole outfield changed at half time, and I was a bit disappointed that some of the younger players didn't play more minutes in the match, just to see how they would have done as the game kind of wore on, because Queen's Park didn't make these types of wholesale substitutions in the match. But alas, it is what it is, and it's a wholesale change. And this is a side that's much more recognisable to me at the City Park Stadium, very close to the first team in the B team, as it were, excluding one or two of the guys obviously that we've seen in the first half. And there was some, again, really interesting developments here. We've seen Welsh come into the team, and Welsh, like, again, you could tell he's a senior player, looked a cut above everyone else, and for the level, like, again, he didn't really put a foot wrong, and, you know, orchestrated the team very well from defence, you know, was the kind of mouth that, or was the voice, I should say, is probably more accurate, that Trusty was in the first half, that kind of senior player. We've seen a lot of development this year in Mitchell Robertson. And again, I think against this kind of senior level team opposition, didn't really find himself wanting too much. This was the first time I seen the kid Kyle, and you can see that he is probably the youngest guy that featured in this match. But the right hand side was where we found a lot more. So this kind of went in it two ways, because the boy Kyle didn't really go on and do the whole inverted thing as much. But similarly on the left hand side, what we've seen with Bonner on the right hand side, we've seen with Summers on the left hand side. Now Summers was playing wide. Summers looked amazing, and you guys that are on the channel for a while will know that this is the guy I've been kind of holding my breath on, as it were. I've been waiting to come back from these loan periods. I think he's done very, very well in his development throughout the B team. Ange gave him his debut. He went to Dunfermline on loan. They almost got promoted. He was a big part of the team. He went to Austria. They almost got promoted. He was a big part of the team. And when you look at him, he still looks like a youth player, but he looks amazing to me. I thought he was brilliant in the game. Showed some amazing techers as well, pulling the ball out the air. And some of his delivery, his pass selection, his attack and play, he was a real handful, and you could tell the Queen's Park players were not happy to be facing him. And he did play wide. He did go on the outside sometimes, don't get me wrong, but he was very quick to tuck inside and not be the wide player as much. And everything kind of went down the right-hand side second half. And between Hatton and McPherson, I thought they did very, very well. Like McPherson and Donovan, for me, I started thinking about this after the game, but you know those stories about how Tierney wasn't the first choice left back at the B team or the youth teams or whatever, he was like third and that kind of thing. See if McPherson became better than Donovan or something like that, I wouldn't be too surprised, because I thought he was actually really solid in this game, gave a good account of himself, and again, considering the level of not just the opposition, but the kind of bar everyone else in the Celtic team was setting in this game, I thought McPherson did pretty well. The boy Hatton, I've been impressed with in B team action previously, but hasn't ever came across as being like a key player or someone that is, like, he didn't play all the games, he didn't start all the games either, but he looked really good in this game, and he was really unlucky not to get more. The amount of times he had his fullback on toast and managed to get into the box, with the support of McPherson, the likes of McCardle and Turley as well, but Hatton did really good second half. I thought he got into the box quite a lot. Isaguzu missed a chance that he really should have been converting, and Hatton himself could have had one or two chances hit the back of the net. Although we could have scored more in the first half, for me, I think, because of the people that are making the chances as well, the opportunities missed second half felt more like opportunities missed, because if Isaguzu got a goal, if Hatton got a goal and an assist or 2 goals or something like that, these kids would have wrote a bit of a headline in this game for themselves, because it ultimately did finish 1-0, as you guys will know. And, again, we had a bit of that mirror image thing just to finish on this point of, Summers in the one side of the pitch not really giving us as much width. Let's say the boy Kyle didn't really burst on. Summers could if he wanted to, but it was more between Turley and Summers what was kind of going on by the left-hand side. And on the right, we very clearly did have width on this side with a winger willing to take on his man, as well as a fullback that was happy to come on and support and keep the play up here. Kind of ticking on, as it were. Now, I may have been getting things wrong, right? But in my notes from the game, I had the second half substitutions being Clark for Doohan on the 63rd minute or whatever, which backs up he's one of the more promising goalkeepers coming through. The other guy that's been on loan, I think at Dunfermline as well, was on the bench. He didn't make an appearance, but that got made in the 63rd minute. And then we got Daly making his kind of debut, if you want to think of it as that. He came off the bench in the 74th minute. Now, I had him coming off the bench for Kyle, but looking at the official websites and whatever, not Celtic, but Flash Scores and all these places, they say he came on for Turley. I'm just going to go with what I think it was, because Turley and Kyle are both like skinny guys with blonde hair. So I'm going to think that was a mistake. I think Kyle was the one that came off for Daly. And Daly was a little red-headed kid, and I actually got him confused at one point. There was a great sequence where Daly came into midfield, and I think Kyle Ure went to left back when that substitution happened. And this Daly was like, the deeper kind of midfielder, and he made a lovely chance in the second half where it was a bit of a duel. The possession was kind of being contested, and he's made a kind of tackle, but he's kind of passed it with the tackle, as it were, and he's slid it right through for somebody who had a great chance. It didn't amount to much, but he looked pretty sharp, by the way, for a little kid, again, that I've not seen play or whatever. Kyle Ure filled in at left back quite well, and I'm pretty sure this is the way the game went anyway. I watched it, but I was on the other side of the pitch from these guys here, and you know what it's like when, you're like the third row on a wee terrace and something's happening all the way over the other side. So I might be a tiny bit wrong on this, but I'm pretty certain that this is how it shook out for the most part. And, Isaguzu got a bit of a mention from Brendan after the game as well. Ultimately, the game finished 1-0. Queen's Park did make some substitutions themselves. There was a few players that looked okay. They had a little player called McDonald, Tyrese McDonald, I think his name is. Didn't do anything that great in the game, but like seemed to have like some really good techers, some really good dribbling ability. So I just thought I would mention him by name since he certainly caught the eye. McCardle did good. Turley did okay. But I think like when you see all these guys playing together, I think Summers, Hatton in the second half were the two standout players, and in the first half, like Donovan, I think was just a box tick, was absolutely fine. But I do think Montgomery and Frame did like do their reputation no harm, let's say, in the match ultimately, as did Johnny Kenny, who again showed himself to be, you know, energetic, ultimately took his chance, could have scored another one or two with the right kind of bounce of the ball. But again, a guy that is all the level, you know, is it the level we need? That's kind of the question, I suppose, isn't it? But yeah, bit of a pre-season skirmish, some tactical kind of tweaks or whatever that we've seen. Or is it tweaks, or is it we're still just playing the same stuff, we're just moving the squad on ever so slightly? Are we staying to the same formula? Is this becoming the club philosophy a little bit more? I am holding out a bit of hope that we see more of Ben Summers throughout this pre-season tournament, and maybe he can be one of the guys that can make it into the first team. And with some of the moves, we're seeing Lagerbielke on his way out, Narocki on his way out, Welsh, Robertson, Murray. These three guys have got to be thinking between themselves. There's only space for one of us in the first team, and it'll be interesting to see probably Murray, all things being equal, the way people would probably favoritise it at the moment. But you never know. Welsh has been relied upon, has been here forever, it feels like as well. And Mitchell Robertson has kind of progressed a lot this year, so you never rule things out. Adding into the likes of Micardo, Turley and Bonner have already made their first team debut. Kyle Ure just signed a long-term contract as well. I think we will see a bunch of these guys maybe go and play for Queen's Park. I'd maybe think Kyle Ure could be one of them, as well as maybe the boy Hatton, maybe even Isiguzu. But after this game, some of the more first-team regulars have started to filter back into training, and we're going to obviously see a bit more movement in the transfer window, I'm sure. And, you know, as we follow the pre-season friendlies through, I'm sure this team and the situation that we've seen in this match will look quite unrecognisable quite quickly. But as Celtic fans all across the world, we want to see what's going on in pre-season. We want to see what's happening with the youth players, and when we get a chance to see some of these guys play with some of the first teamers, it's a really great way to get a gauge on where they're at. And, you know, like, are they going to be featured into the plans? Should we loan them out? Could they break through? All that kind of thing. So I had a lot of fun watching the game. I had a good bit of fun making this video. I hope you enjoyed it as well. On screen and now some other stuff that we've made that YouTube thinks you might enjoy. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you have enjoyed the video. Of course, hit the like button to see more videos like this as well. Jump into the comment section. Let me know your thoughts, feelings, takeaways, opinions, all that good stuff, guys. Hail, hail, and Mon the Hoops.